So today's technique will be a very, very simple and practical technique for you to apply if you have some of those beautiful ladies who are looking to go a little bit deeper, who are looking to embrace some warmer colors. And also, if you are a balayage fan, I definitely have some tips for you that are going to be very beneficial. So make sure that you guys are coming on in, sit down, have a good comfortable seat. I see we got some people from all over. Where are you guys from? Okay, we got Kimberly in Kentucky. Kimberly, you're not too far from me. I'm actually in Ohio, guys. So right now it's a little bit, our weather's a little up and down sometimes. It's warm today. Tomorrow it'll probably be real winter. You just never know in Ohio. So I'm sure that Kimberly can feel my pain. But yes, you guys, we're going to jump right on in. We have some amazing moderators today who are going to make sure that you guys will get any information that you need. The comments, the formulas, and everything that I'll be using today will be posted in the comments below. So make sure if you guys have questions about what I'm using, about why, or just any questions pertaining to the technique or any product that I'm using today, please feel free to drop your questions in the comments below because I am able to see them today. So I'll be able to answer any questions that you guys have as I'm moving through. So let's jump right on in and get started, you guys. Before we actually get started on the technique, I just want to show you guys what you're going to be learning today. Guys, as you can see, my beautiful mannequin, look, I don't even like pulling through her curls because they're already so pretty. My beautiful mannequin has her cinnamon balayage going on already. And so as you guys can see, we're working with a deep, dark, natural base. And we're going to be creating a very soft, natural looking cinnamon balayage. So I want you guys to think of this as a technique that's beautiful and transitional. So if you do have clients who are already light and bright and they're looking for deeper, warmer tones and they're looking to make those smooth transitions, this is a great technique that'll be able to be a transition for you because we are going to talk about toners as well. So the first half of our class, we're going to be talking about balayage, how to actually create this beautiful lift on dark natural hair, what products to use and how we're going to do it. And then we're going to talk about the actual toner formula that I'm going to be using. You guys will get to see me apply the toner that I used on the opposite side of this mannequin. And of course, you will actually see the full finish of this beautiful look once it's all said and done. And guys, seriously, get into it. How gorgeous. Seriously. So, or blur to the side because we're going to come back to this beautiful girl in just a minute. But we're going to jump right on in. And first, figure out how we're going to lift her. How are we going to get that beautiful balayage that we're looking for, right? So I'm going to be working on another mannequin that is very similar, just as dark, that also has a dark natural base, but this one has more of a slight red tone to it. Now, this mannequin, she was just lifted with permanent color once upon a time. So we're going to go over her permanent base and her natural dark base. And we're going to apply a balayage over the top of this so you guys can actually see how this transition can work. Whether your customer or client is previously lightened, has previous color, or they're completely virgin. A lot of times it's rare that we find a real virgin with no previous color. So I want you guys to see how you're going to be able to utilize this exact technique over hair that's been previously colored as well. Now, the one thing that I love about balayage is mainly surface painting. And so it does not take a lot of lift to create a seamless balayage. So you want to make sure that when you are thinking about what the look is that you're going for this particular technique, we're not looking to get a super high lift. So the product and the lightener that I'm going to be using today is going to be Vero Light. It's going to be our Vero Light Lightening Powder. This comes in a cream base as well, so you can also use the cream if you are balayage or surface painting. But today I'm going to use the powder because I like to be able to create the perfect consistency for myself. And then we're going to use 20 volume developer in Lumishine. With Joico, you can use whatever developer you desire with the lighteners. You only want to be mindful of the developer that you're choosing if you're using permanent color or if you are using a demi-permanent color. But today, since we're just working with lightener, we're going to use Vero Light Lightener, which I already have a couple of scoops in my bowl. And I have one thing I want you guys to think about when you are mixing up your lightener, especially for surface painting. Because I'm going to be using a 20 volume developer, that 20 volume is going to give me a beautiful lift in a short amount of time. However, because I'm painting on the surface of the hair, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to get extremely good saturation. And by saturation, I mean it's not going to push or penetrate through the hair. It's going to mainly lift that outer exterior of the hair. So with my mixing, I want to get a good creamy consistency that's still thick, almost the texture of cake frosting. And so, guys, I'm sorry in advance because I do use a lot of food references, but this is just the way that I teach. It's much easier to give you visuals that are related to things that you actually know. So I'm going to start off with a 1-to-1 mixing ratio, meaning one part lightener to 1 part developer. And so what that's going to do is that's going to get me a very good creamy consistency, but also allow my lightener to lift evenly. And so I don't want it to be too thick and I don't want it to be too thin. I want it to be just thick enough that it's going to sit on the very surface of the hair and not seep through. Hey, Maria. And not seep through the hair, but thick enough that I'm going to get a beautiful lift with that 20 volume. And so, again, my mixing ratio is 1-to-1, and I wanted to show you guys this actual process because I like to make sure that my consistency is right before I actually move on to apply my lightener. And so the great thing about Vero Light is very, very easy to mix, but as you guys can see, it comes off right now. I have a good thick consistency. I don't want it to be too thin where it's running. I need it to have a nice thick consistency. As I said, the texture of cake frosting, and not the whipped kind, the regular. So I have a perfect consistency now. I'm going to sit my whisk to the side, and now we're going to prep and protect. So as you guys may have already saw in the formula that was posted in the comments, first things first is going to be prep and protect with our Defy Damage Pro Series 1. And our Defy Damage Pro Series 1 is going to be our bond protection or bond optimizing spray. And ultimately what that means is we are protecting the bonds of the hair before we apply lightener to the hair. And guys, you've seen, if you have taken a Joico class, you guys have seen us using this before, but I'm going to still give you a quick recap. With Defy Damage, you are going to be protecting the bonds of the hair before you apply color or lightener to the hair, so you don't have to change or alter your formula. As you guys can see, I'm simply just shaking this can and I'm spraying it directly onto the hair in short downward bursts. So it's going directly onto the hair. The molecules are very small, so they're going to sit onto the hair and they're going to absorb in immediately. One of the great things that I love is that it takes absolutely no time. Guys, I love Defy Damage because of the fact that I can literally add this in as an upcharge onto my service. I'm going to guarantee the overall health of my customer's hair, and I don't have to change or alter my formula. Not to mention, you guys just saw me apply that. It literally was less than 30 seconds. Depending on the length and density of the hair, guys, you can be done applying your Defy Damage within a minute. Less than, like way less than that. I'm over exaggerating. But you can be done in less than a minute. And that is easily, depending on your area, that's easily a $50+ upcharge of protection. So make sure that you are charging accordingly for your Defy Damage treatment, and make sure that you are explaining to your customers what you're using and why, because they will definitely appreciate it. So once you have applied your Defy Damage, you've brushed it into the hair, and as you guys can see, the overall smoothness of the hair is already improved because of the fact that the Defy Damage has already absorbed into that hair strand. It's preparing the hair to receive either the color or lightener, which I absolutely love. Kimberly said Defy Damage was the best thing ever made. It saved my hair after having breast cancer and going through radiation. Amen. I am so happy to hear that, Kimberly. Listen, one thing I love about Joico is that we truly are the healthy hair color company. And so we're always looking to keep the hair as healthy as possible. And so whenever I'm thinking about techniques and how I'm going to utilize different products, Defy Damage is always a must. Like literally cannot go without it. So now that we have already prepped the hair, we are going to go straight in and we're going to start applying our lightener. Now guys, if you've ever seen me do a balayage technique, you guys know. Where's she going, y'all? My mannequins, I think they be acting like they like real people sometimes. They be forgetting, like, you're a client. Sit still. But anyway, so what I like to do is I like to use my hands. I am a hand painter. I like to get all the way into it with my hands. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work in diagonal sectioning because I want to make sure that I'm able to, number one, create a lot of softness and diffusion in the hair. So as you guys can see, I've already did my first section, which is going to be a diagonal section. And then the next thing I'm going to do, now guys, you all know, if you are familiar with balayage, we are painting on, again, the surface of the hair. So you want to make sure that that section is nice and smooth. Take your time. Even though balayage can seem to be a slow-moving process because you're not looking to get extremely high lift, you still want to take your time with your sections, because what will tend to happen is if you rush through the process, you will really get very uneven and blotchy results. So take your time. As you can see, I just took my time to smooth out that section, make sure that it's nice and taut. And if I push my comb up against this section, as you can see, the hair is not buckling or moving. But if I were to not have as much tension on this section and I was trying to paint on this section, it would be moving. I would not be able to get a smooth and seamless transition. So I make sure that before I even go in to start applying lightener to the hair, I smooth that section out very well. I take my thumb and my index finger to hold the section right below the mid strand, and I'm going to make sure that this section is nice and solid, okay? Now, as I said a little bit earlier, guys, I like to get my hands in it. I am not a paddle and board type of artist. I like to use my hands. Now, that does not mean that you cannot use a paddle and a board. Guys, use whatever makes you the most comfortable. I like to take a little small brush. This is the brush that I utilize to distribute my product. I put it right on the back of my hand, so that way I can keep my hands clean as I'm working through my sections. And then I take my power painter, and I'm going to use that to actually apply my lightener. So before I actually put anything on the hair, I'm going to coat my brush on both sides, just so I can make sure I get really good saturation. And again, I'm holding the hair nice and taut, and I'm just using my brush to just paint along the surface of the hair. Now, another reason why I wanted to use a dark haired mannequin is because I want you guys to really see where the lightener is actually resting, meaning where am I placing it? I want you to be able to see that because it gives you a good depiction of what's going to actually be lightened and what's not. So as you guys can see already, I'm starting to create a natural blend right onto the hair. Now, if you want, this is totally optional. You can do highs and lows, meaning you can take your highest peak all the way up and bring it down, bring it back up if you want, or in other words, V's and W's, as a lot of people like to call them. You can create your high and your low however you desire. That part is totally up to you. And with balayage, the amount of saturation that you want is totally up to you as well. In this technique, we're going to be mainly focusing on surface painting, because what I'm going to do is I would like to see how the dark natural base and the light play together. And so again, that's going to create a very beautiful and seamless blend, especially because I am working on a mannequin that already has some previous colors. So I'm not looking to get a super duper high lift. I'm just looking for adding a nice little pop of highlight, Very seamless, very natural looking. And then we're going to tone right as she is. Now, some of you guys may have seen this in one of my previous class, or if you guys have watched other balayage artists. Today, I'm going to be using foil to separate my sections. Because I am working with traditional lightener, I'm just going to place that foil right over the top of that section. So when I drop my next section down, you're not going to see a transfer. Can you use mesh? Can you use saran wrap or plastic wrap or anything that you like? Absolutely. You can use whatever barrier you prefer. Today, because I'm working with a natural dark base, I'm going to use foil, because the good thing about the foil is that it is going to incubate and warm up the lightener on that section. So not only am I going to have a beautiful barrier between my two sections, but my lightener will also serve as a heat source, as a natural heat source, where we don't have to worry about that hair lifting uncontrollably. It's going to lift right where my lightener is laid on the hair, nowhere else, and we're going to get a beautiful seamless lift. Now, I'm going to do these sections back to back because, again, we're painting on the surface of the hair. And so what's going to happen is, as we work through these sections, depending on how big you take your slices, my slices are about 1/2 inch thick. And so depending on how big you take your slices and how dense the hair is, you're going to see either a lot of light or a little. So be mindful of the overall density of your customer's hair, how much light you want to see, and how much depth you want to leave in between each section. And so by light, I mean, when you paint that lightener onto that section, that's about how much light you're going to see. So if you cover this whole section at the very top of that hair is going to be lighter. And then the hair underneath, which is not touched, is going to be your depth. And so you're going to make sure that as you are going through and you're painting the hair, don't just paint without a process or without an idea of what you want to see. So I personally like to take about 1/2 inch sections all the way through, especially if I'm doing back-to-back painting, because what that does is it creates almost a very natural highlight and low light without me having to work so hard. And so I like to be able to kind of work smarter and not harder, especially with balayage, because sometimes you'll start working and you'll start painting, and then before you know it, it kind of seems like your lightener sections get lost in between all the dark sections. Have you ever felt that or experienced that? I'm sure you guys have. I know I have. And so what I started doing was I started looking for ways to create more saturation, meaning to create more light sections without over painting the hair. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm kind of painting with a high and low method. I don't really like to do V's as frequently because I feel like sometimes the other side of my V can kind of get a little lost. So I just like to do a very, very natural peak. And that way, whenever I comb through the hair, especially depending on where my client likes to actually wear their hair, I just like to keep it looking really, really natural and lived in, as if their hair is naturally that color. And so one more pro tip, you guys, as we're talking about balayage, make sure to keep yourself a nice clean towel so that you can wipe your hands if any of that lightener gets on the back side of your hands. The other thing that I love about working with my hand is that this side of my hand typically is where most of my product rests, and this side of my hand I can keep fairly clean. So as I'm working through, it's much easier to just keep moving, especially because I want to make sure that I get a very beautiful and even lift as I'm going through. I don't like for my lift to be uneven. I try to move as quickly as I can so that I can get everything saturated, all of my sections painted on beautifully, without me having to compromise my formula or the health of the hair. So we're just continuing to move through in diagonal sections. Guys, look, I almost forgot that fast. Take your foil And you're going to sit that right on top of that last section. You don't really have to push it into the hair. You're just going to slightly tap that foil so that it adheres to the very exterior of your lightener section and it doesn't move. Now, again, remember what I said earlier. My lightener is a very, very thick consistency. And so because of that, it's very easy for my foil to just stick right to that section. So as I'm moving through, I make sure that I'm applying my lightener very heavily because I want to make sure that I'm getting that really good saturation, guys. So again, I'm just continuing to work in diagonal sections. I'm taking my fingers, I'm smoothing that section out. And then I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to apply my product onto the back of my hand. There we go. And then we're going to apply directly to the top of the hair. Now, what you guys will also notice is that I go heavy on my saturation. Saturation truly is key. So as you guys can see, I'm applying the bulk of my product right at the mid strand. I don't go and take my brush all the way up to the first peak. I apply the bulk of my lightener right here at the mid section because what I can do from here is I can either move that lightener up or I can move it down. And so depending on how blended I want that section to be, I will typically continue to move my lightener up the hair strand, and then I'll take my brush and I'll feather up to soften out those lines. Now, this right here was something that I wish that I had learned very, very early when I first started doing balayage, guys. Oh my goodness. If you want to remove some of your lightener, you brush down, but a great way to make sure that you get good saturation, especially in this area right here, where it tends to kind of soften those lines a whole lot because you're trying to blend it down. Make sure that you take that brush once you're done and just feather up because you're still keeping your lightener nice and heavy. So as you guys can see, even though this is a very soft line, it doesn't create a harsh, strong line of demarcation. Even though this is still a really soft line and it's blended, there's still product there. Because if I were to go and brush down and start removing product, more than likely it would be dark right here, or I would not get full lift. So I would only get about half of the lift that I actually really need in that section versus being able to really apply that lightener heavy to that small section, which guys, I'm telling you, it makes a world of a difference. So just make sure when you are trying to remove product, feather your brush down. And when you are trying to apply product heavier, feather your brush up. Small tips that make a huge difference, especially with balayage. And so once you're done, you're just going to drop that section down. I'm taking my hand just as a barrier on the back, and I am just slightly tapping that foil right onto that section. Again, my foil is going to help serve as an incubator to help keep that lightener lifting beautifully. Now, another thing that I want you guys to see as I'm starting to work through, you guys can see my first 3 sections were back to back. I didn't have any hair left out in between those, right? And that's how I created that really heavy light on the mids and ends. So as you look at the hair from what I showed you guys on my mannequin, the first half of it is nice and saturated on the bottom half of that hair because every section was back to back to back. Now what I'm going to start doing so that I can blend in this natural base, I'm going to leave very small amounts of hair out in between my sections. Because what's going to start to happen is, again, we're just adding more depth. And what's going to begin to happen is once I add in, or in this case, leave out hair, that's going to create a more dimensional balayage blend. And so I'm just choosing my sections very, very carefully because I don't want to oversaturate, but I also don't want to miss an opportunity to really, really add some lightness and brightness. And so I typically will keep working in the same diagonal motion. And I'm going to take my comb and just keep working down the lengths of the hair. Now, as you are moving towards the front of the face, begin to diagonal and go very heavy around the front of this face, because most people, especially those who are, even if they're looking to go a little bit deeper, they may be looking to go deeper in color and in tone, but they still want to be bright. Nobody, unless you just truly enjoy having very dark natural hair, if you are going from light to dark, guys, you still want to be able to see some light and some bright. So make sure that as you are going in and you are painting, really, really focus heavy about getting some lightness around the front of the face, okay? And so the way that I tend to do that is I continue working with my diagonal sections, but as you guys can see, I'm going to start bringing those peaks higher up in the front than I do in the back. And so again, I'm just taking my brush, I'm applying the bulk of my lightener to this midsection right in the middle. And then I'm going to begin to apply right up to that front peak. Now again, there's many, many different ways that you can do this. Some people like to work and brush up. Some people like to continue to brush down. I do a combination. I make sure to apply a lot of product in a downward motion, and then to feather and soften my line, I will brush up as I'm doing right now. So I just take my brush and I brush up toward the scalp. Now, remember I said a little bit earlier, if you start to see that hair is getting a little dark or your lightener is getting a little thin, go in and apply some more, just to make sure that you have good saturation. Saturation with balayage means not the same as it would with highlights. You're not looking to saturate the actual strand. You're looking to cover the strand. And so you want to make sure that your section is fully covered. Where you see white is where it'll be bright. Meaning wherever your lightener is the heaviest is where you're going to get the best lift. So you want to make sure that you do not see that natural dark hair through your lightener, because if you're looking at this section, you guys can see already it's nice and completely coated. You don't see any of this natural dark hair through my section. So you want to make sure that you continue that same method all the way up the strand and all the way down. So even though I put the bulk of my product on the mid strand, even as I'm working through, I make sure to drag that product down, and I make sure to brush it up as well. So that way we can see a really, really beautiful natural lift. And again, I'm going to place this foil right on top of that section. I'm not looking to push it too much into the hair. I'm just going to place it directly on top, take my hand, and just make sure that it sticks. And again, because we have a very thick consistency of lightener that we're working with today, trust me, it's going to stick. If that foil falls off of there, 9 times out of 10, your lightener is probably too thin. So you want to make sure that you're mindful of how thick and thin your lightener is. So remember, guys, I'm coming down to the end. My lightener is still pretty thick. And so if you get through the process and you're starting to see your lightener's getting a little fluffy, just take your brush and just mix it. Again, we want the consistency of a nice, thick frosting. Not cake batter, because the cake batter is going to be kind of a little bit creamy. You want it to still be creamy, but thick. So when you lay it, it's going to stay right in place, okay? And as I said before, I'm using the back of my hand. As far as your application style goes, guys, you can use the back of your hand. You can use a paddle, whatever you like. I just prefer to use the back of my hand because it's much easier. And typically, as I'm working through my section, it's much quicker. I'm able to just move straight through the hair. Now, if you notice that you're going through your sections and you're like, crap, I'm getting lightener all over the place. If you are a messy foiler and you're a messy colorist, it's okay, because I used to be one too. I still have some messy tendencies, so don't feel bad. If you feel like it's too much pressure for you to use your hand, guys, use whatever makes you feel comfortable. I promise there's no right or wrong way to do this. These are just the ways that work the best for me. And I believe that they help me to be able to embrace balayage in a way that I never really thought that I could. So again, we're going to just keep moving through our section. And remember, I said a little earlier, as you guys can see, we're coming up around the front of the face. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep working up around the front of the face. And my section is going to continue to be a diagonal, 1/2 inch thick section. And I'm going to bring my peak up higher and right to the front of the face. Because I want to see... And, you know, I'm treating this as if, this mannequin, as if she's my actual client. My client wants to see brightness around her face. So I make sure to add that in. I focus on that the more that I get closer to the front of the face. So all of my sections will begin to be diagonal forward instead of back. Does anybody have any questions? We are coming up to the end of our balayage application. We're going to get ready to start toning in just a minute. But guys, if you have questions about the application style, about what I am using, we do have our amazing moderators who are dropping the formula in the chat, in the comments. But guys, please feel free. If you have questions, please ask questions. I want to make sure I tackle any questions that you guys have during this live session, because trust me when I say, I know that the virtual world, the virtual world of education can be a little challenging and a little intimidating sometimes. But guys, if you have questions, feel free. This is a safe place for you to ask them. So again, I am literally just laying my lightener like I'm icing a cake. I told y'all I like to use food references because food references are probably the best way for me to like explain things that seem complex but really are very simple. And so I like to lay my lightener as if I'm icing a cake. When you're icing a cake, you want that thing to be completely covered, guys. You do not want to see your cake crust through your icing, right? You might do a crumb coat. You might do a crumb coat first. But ultimately, you want to see a full covered cake. You don't want to see cake crumb through your cake or through your icing. So just like coating a cake or icing a cake, you're going to coat your section with lightener the exact same way. You want it to be completely covered. That's what saturation means in balayage. Covered means saturation. Wherever you see light is where it's going to be bright. If you still see the natural dark through your lightener, that section is 9 times out of 10 going to dry out and it's not going to lift evenly. So that's where you get that blotchiness, where you don't get a beautiful even balayage lift. And trust me, it took a long time for me to understand that. And so for years, I honestly just strayed away from balayage because I just did not want to, I didn't want to have to correct the work that I was doing because it seemed like I was just not getting good saturation. It seemed like it was not even, it wasn't blended, and I just was tired of being frustrated. But eventually I started figuring out the reason why. Guys, look at that section. Even though right in here, I still created that soft, beautiful blend, the lightener is going all the way up to the very edge of where I want that feathered section to stop, because I need it to be fully saturated all the way up to the very, very peak. And so you want to make sure that as you are working through your sections, that section is completely covered, guys. And so that is how you'll know that that section is actually going to lift evenly. And again, I'm just using my foil to create a beautiful barrier in between my sections because I'm working with traditional lightener. So you just want to continue to move in the same method. Oh, thank you, Kimberly. Kimberly says she loves my classes. Amen. I'm happy to hear that because I definitely, I love teaching, and you guys can probably tell based off of my high energy in classes. I absolutely enjoy sharing techniques that make life a lot easier for us as colorists, as artists. And so yes, I'm glad that you guys are taking away some valuable nuggets that you'll be able to use. All right. So I am still working, same sectioning. As you guys can see, I'm focusing on the front of the face now. So I'm continuing to move through, and I'm focusing right around the front of the face with my 1/2 inch sections. And I am painting with those peaks right up around the front of the face. So some of you guys may have heard of what's called the money piece or face framing highlight. This is the same way I do it with balayage. I just focus on back-to-back slices, and I bring my peaks all the way up to the very, very front so that I can make sure that I get good saturation. And because those sections are back to back, you'll see a lot of brightness right around the front. Alrighty. So again, I'm still working with the back of my hand. Guys, I'm telling you right now, if you start using this technique or you start doing more balayage techniques, try using the back of your hand. I'm telling you, as scary as it might seem, once you kind of get comfortable with it, it'll be much, much easier. Because typically, if I need to do even a full to half head of balayage, using the back of my hand and using techniques like this, I'm able to power through that balayage application in like 45 minutes, seriously. And that's partially because I've gotten more comfortable with it. But the other thing that I do love about hand painting is that it's kind of repetitive. It's the same method over and over again. So really, it gets to be very therapeutic. I am a creature of habit, so I don't mind doing the same thing over and over again. It's just like foiling the hair. You just do the same method over and over and over again. And so for me, it gets extremely therapeutic because I feel like I'm able to just kind of release with painting, and I feel that creativity kind of flowing through me. All right, guys, so I'm just taking my brush and I'm just swiping that lightener up. You guys won't see me do that a whole lot, but I always make sure that I go through and I get good saturation. Yes, I will definitely show the underside. Hold on one second. Let me actually bring this on down just to make sure we are good. Before I go to those ends, check it out, guys. We got one little bit that tried to get out of there. Let me just show you real quick. This is how you know you're doing well. You should not see any lightener through that section, guys. Still, when you check yourself, make sure you try to keep that section nice and tight. But make sure that you are using your brush parallel to the hair. You don't want to go in at a vertical, or you don't want to go in like you're stabbing at that section. Some people will turn their brush vertical to soften and break up lines, but ultimately you want to try to keep your brush as parallel to the hair as possible and keep a soft hand. It does not take a lot. I'm telling you, it's very, very easy to push through your section. The most push through that I would do is on the very, very ends. And that's mainly because I don't mind seeing a heavy saturation through the ends, especially because that section is so thin. And so I'll take my brush and I'll push that lightener in on the very, very ends so I can get those ends nice and saturated. But other than that, as I'm working through my section, I keep my brush parallel to the hair so that I can make sure as I'm painting down that hair, I'm just painting on the very surface. It's not penetrating through, okay? So we're going to do just one more back-to-back slice before we move on to the toning section, guys. Does anybody have any questions as I am continuing to work down this lightener section? Because I want to make sure that I don't miss any questions. I want to make sure you guys get all of your questions out, get all of the knowledge and wisdom that you can possibly get from this class. And guys, this last section is going to be almost full saturation. And what that means is I'm going to almost cover this whole section. Not completely, but because I do want to keep some depth in there, but I am going to cover majority of this section because, again, around the front of the face, I want to see very, very light and bright. So I like to keep it as heavy as I can around the front of the face. I'm just taking my brush. Again, I'm applying as heavy as I possibly can right in the mid-strand area. As I'm working, I just continue to move up the hair. Guys, there is something about hand painting that is so therapeutic. I seriously understand why people who do paint like to, because it's so therapeutic. So I'm just taking my brush again. I'm feathering up that section. I'm just dragging my lightener up. And as you guys can see, I've almost completely saturated this section. The only depth that you're going to see is right in here. But as you can see, I've almost completely saturated this full section. Because again, I want to make sure that I keep that brightness around the front of the face. And remember I said a second ago, I like to make sure that I just saturate. Okay. That section jumped out of my hand. If that happens, guys, just take your fingers, pick it up. It'll come right back. But I'll go through and I'll just saturate the very, very bottom, meaning the very ends of the hair, and drop that section. And that's it. Okay, Naid said, hi, the way you do it, is it going to lighten underneath the hair or only where you applied it? That is a great question. It's only going to lighten where I applied it. And so if you need to, or you are wanting to get lightness underneath your section, can you saturate fully? Absolutely. But my suggestion would be take smaller sections and do more saturation, similar to what I just did on that last section. So you're going to want to do more sections of bright instead of trying to just push through the hair, because most of the sections with balayage are always going to be thicker sections. And so you want to make sure that you're mindful of how you apply and how you're working with it. Kimberly said, foiling is therapeutic for me. Absolutely. Listen, I feel like when you find that thing for you that is super duper therapeutic, stick with it. For me, it's anything color related most of the time, especially if I know that the color situation is going to come out really pretty. I've already formulated correctly. Then I'm really excited. So since we're talking about formulation, in our last 15 minutes, I'm going to talk about how to create this cinnamon color. And so I don't know if you guys have ever actually seen an actual like cinnamon stick or clove of cinnamon. I personally feel like cinnamon really is kind of like a dark copper brown. And so that's my perception of cinnamon. Now, you guys can perceive cinnamon however you want or formulate for it however you want. However, the way that I have created this dark or this cinnamon balayage, what I did was I lifted the hair So I already went in and pre-lightened the hair using the exact same technique I just showed you guys. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply a Lumishine Liquid Demi. I'm going to be working with 2 formulas. My first formula is going to be 6NG and 6NC. So natural gold and natural copper in the Lumishine Liquid Demis. This is what they typically will look like once you go and purchase. And so that formula is going to go all the way from the root to the mid shaft. And then on the very, very ends, I'm going to apply 7NC. I think I picked that up already. 7 natural copper. And so that is just to keep that very light bright around the very ends of the hair. I didn't lift the hair super duper high, and I love the natural copper family because to me personally, natural copper is a perfect balance of a brown orange. The natural predominant is a perfectly balanced brown, and then that copper tone, of course, is a pure tone copper. But the great thing about levels 6 and 7, they're not super bright. They're actually just very deep, natural looking oranges. And also, because the brown or the natural base is there, it helps to mute it down just a little bit. So this was my way and my rendition of being able to create the cinnamon look, especially because, like I said, a little bit goes a long, long way when it comes to your toner formulas and what you're using. You want to think about what makes up cinnamon or auburn or red. What makes up those colors? And so all you have to do is really think about what 2 tonal families are going to mix to create this, if it's not a pure tone color, if that makes sense. So you just want to think about those things when you are choosing your tonal families. And so again, I'm going to be working with my first formula, which is 6NC natural copper and 6NG natural gold. And the reason why I chose NG is because, again, it's a natural, but the secondary tone is gold, which I love gold because it has just straight yellow, light, bright, airy, but not too dark. So a lot of people will typically look at a natural gold and feel like, oh my gosh, it's just going to look like yellow, right? No, because the natural in natural gold is going to control the warmth. So it creates a very beautiful looking warm color without it looking like straight Goldilocks. So I actually utilize natural gold quite a lot behind the chair because I love the fact that that yellow is in there. Yellow helps to reflect light beautifully, and it also helps to keep your colors, if you're working with a natural and you're looking to get a warm tone, it keeps your colors very, very natural looking, but still very, very bright. And so I'm just taking my Big Daddy brush and I am bringing my Formula 1 all the way down to the mid strand. Because ultimately what I'm going to do is I'm just going to melt these 2 colors right into each other. Because they are only a slight shift in level, meaning they're only 1 level apart, they're going to blend together very, very beautifully. And because we are working with a warmer tone, they're going to still be light and airy, but deep. And so I try to think of ways that even if I'm going into darker levels, how can I still keep them bright, you know? Just because you're going dark don't mean that it got to be shoe polish dark brown. Just because you're going a little bit deeper, you still can have your tone ultimately look very light and bright, or light and airy. I like to say airy because sometimes darker colors tend to look very dense and just heavy looking. And so that's a kind of good way for me to explain. Y'all, when I say my watch has been trying to talk all day, I don't understand. I'm not talking to you, Siri. But I like to create very light and airy looking deep colors. And so that's my rendition and my way of being able to do it without you having to sacrifice the lightness. And guys, of course, you know, I'm always talking about formula and formulation, how to be able to formulate properly. So those are like my top whys for why I chose the formula that I chose. I want you guys to make sure, if you have not already, check out the Joico website. If you don't have an actual Joico swatch book, check out the Joico website. They have swatch charts that you can go in and you can actually look at all of the tonal families on the swatch charts, and you can get more comfortable with the tonal families that are on the swatch charts and how they work, what are the bases of them, that sort of thing. I would highly suggest take a look at those swatch charts and study them, especially if you are an avid Joico user. There's nothing like being able to know and understand the tonal families that you're working with and why you're using what you're using, because it truly does help you to become a more confident colorist. So I would highly suggest check out the Joico website if you're not familiar with some of our tonal families, or you just need a little refresher, because there's nothing wrong with a refresher. Go on there, check those out, but also make sure to follow the Joico page, because there's always amazing education going on the Joico page. I personally am just one of many amazing artists with Joico. We have amazing artists who are always teaching good and valuable education. So make sure that you are following the Joico page and also checking out the Joico site for all upcoming classes, because trust me when I say there's some good stuff coming up this year as well as next year. So guys, again, I am going through and I am just making sure to saturate my sections. And again, on this portion, because these colors are so close in level, I'm not doing anything extravagant. I'm literally just making sure to saturate very, very well. And I'm melting these two colors right on into each other. I'm not doing anything extra. I'm just taking a little comb and I'm just pulling that first formula down and just melting them together. And so this is another quick way to be able to make sure that you are getting good saturation. You can use a brush, you can use a comb. I'm just using a slightly wider tooth comb to make sure that I am getting good saturation and pulling that color into each other, making sure that they melt together beautifully. And because we are just looking to tone, this is only going to process for 15 minutes at room temperature. That's it, guys. And so again, my formula for this is going to be 6 in G and 6 in C, 6 natural gold and 6 natural copper with 5 volume developer. These are Lumishine liquid demis. And then I'm also using on the ends, I'm using 7 NC natural copper with 5 volume developer. And I am literally just melting those two colors right into each other. I'm applying those directly to the hair. You don't have to overthink it when it comes to your toner. Just make sure you know what you're using and why. Trust me when I say taking a look at those swatch charts is going to truly help you to be able to make sure that you understand what you're using and why. And so guys, in this last 5 minutes, do we have any questions? While I'm painting away, do you guys have questions about the toners that I've used, about the Lumishine line in general, the application style, anything of that nature, guys? I want to make sure I answer any questions that you guys have as we are moving through the hair, because this part is actually like watching paint dry. I'm going to be done with this in literally a few minutes. I just want to make sure I answer any questions that you guys have as I'm wrapping on up. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. If you guys enjoyed today's class, I would love to hear that as well. If you guys enjoyed today's class or you plan on using today's technique or formula, please make sure to drop that in the comments as well. I would love to come and check out your work. Our last class, I featured somebody who actually took the technique and applied it. So if you guys are interested in being featured, make sure that you tag me. I would love to see your work as you guys are growing and utilizing today's technique. And also make sure to check out the Joico Facebook page, because Facebook and Instagram page, because you will get to see the after photos from today's class. For the warmer toners like the one you're using, how long will you let it process? I would let this process for 15 minutes. Processing time is generally the same, just depending on what toner family you're using. For warmer toners, you're just looking to get the control of the warmth or neutralizing of the warmth with still, actually not neutralizing, control. You're looking to more so control that warmth and create a more natural muted look without it being super gold. So it doesn't take a lot to do that with our liquid demis. Literally, when you apply them to the hair, they start working immediately. So it does not take a lot, and you really will see a huge difference within that first 10 minutes. And then the last 5, you're just letting it finish depositing. Once you're done, you will definitely see a difference. I like to sometimes just apply my toner and walk away. I put a timer on for about 15 minutes. I come back in 10 to check it and make sure that everything is saturated beautifully. But other than that, 15 minutes at room temperature. You don't have to do anything else. I'm going to set a timer on my watch and she's done. All right. Oh, thank you so much, Naive. She said, nice. It was a great class. As you're a very talented hairstylist and teacher. Thank you so much. Guys, I just want to make sure that you also go and check out the Joico Instagram page. The after photos and video will be posted later on, as well as check out my Instagram page. I am at tcoloredme.com or tcoloredme.com, at tee.colored.me. on Instagram, and the Joico page is at Joico. Make sure that you go and follow both pages so you can see the after photos and videos, and also tag Joico, tag myself if you guys do try this technique. We would love to see all of your work, and I appreciate you guys for dedicating your Tuesday, this last hour of your time, and I so appreciate you guys being here to the end. So I will see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.